The Tennis Gambling Podcast on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network is brought to you by Kalshi. Make real money predicting sports. Kalshi available in every state. Also, get $20 free. Just sign up with the code SGPN. That's Kalshi promo code SGPN. And welcome everyone to the Tennis Gambling Podcast here on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. Currently Sunday evening, February 22nd, around 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. I'm as always Scott Reichel, once again going solo for this pod. Time to get into the breakdown of the three upcoming ATP events. We have Acapulco, we have Dubai, and we have Santiago. So once again, we have two hardcourt events and one clay event for the upcoming week. But once again, a bunch of matches, a bunch of tennis. Should be fun. Looking forward to breaking down these three events. Now, for the future update, we do have quarter odds for two of the three. We do not have quarter odds available for Santiago, but we do have them available for Acapulco and Dubai. So we will be doing those two events first. That's the order. Then we'll get into Santiago at the end. Now, before we get into the actual recap of what happened on Sunday, a reminder, if you want to support the show, you can like, subscribe on YouTube. You can also check out the podcast on Spotify or Apple. Plus, a reminder, don't forget to check out the merch store. A lot of great Tennis Game Pockets merch that we have on the SGPN merch store. We have shirts, we have sweatshirts, mugs, we have hats now as well. Different colors, very affordable. Think you like the options that we have available, so check that out. Plus, a reminder, check out the SGPN app, free to download in the App Store. So instead of going to YouTube, Spotify, or Apple, you can find all of the network's podcasts in one easy location. Check out the SGPN app for the picks and podcasts for free, once again, in the App Store. So moving on into the recap of what happened for the last episode, which we recorded earlier today. We ended up splitting the lock and dog picks in Delray. Won the lock with the under half a tie break at -110 between Paul and Korda. So that ended up working out well. Ended up going the way that I thought it would actually, which was getting one close set, probably a 4-4, followed by a late set break. And we got it. Korda eventually led 5-4, got the break, and then at that point, Paul fell apart in the second set, and Korda kind of coasted. Made an adventure of the final service game, but still found a way over the finish line. So nice job by him, and we ended up cashing the lock. For the dog, ended up picking up a loss, had the over 2.5 sets at +130, which was really never close. The first set was competitive. Paul got a break to start the second set. So we actually had a perfect script, which was Korda leading the first set and winning the first set, then Paul getting the break immediately to force a third, and then Paul immediately fell apart. I think he lost the next 4 games. He got broken 2 times in a row. The real story of the match in itself was the wind. Korda definitely seemed comfortable in the wind. A couple of unforced errors here and there, which is expected, but Paul could not handle the wind at all, and it felt like his footwork and his overall shots were all over the place because he couldn't adjust to the trajectory of the ball. I'd say the shot that won Korda the entire match was the backhand slice. He was just using it more and more often as the match went on, and he kept landing it. And it felt like Paul kept struggling to actually keep the ball in play with the wind playing a factor. So Korda ended up coasting for a nice, easy win. Was impressed by the strategic adjustment that he made. I don't know if the coaches told him to do it, but it felt like as the first set progressed, he started to sprinkle in the backhand slice a bit more. And once he did it, it felt like Paul had no answers. Not to mention Korda, of course, having a good overall serve, being tough to break in general. Paul seemed to struggle to land the first serve based on the actual weather. And once again, Korda was able to prolong rallies, kind of just wait for the mistake to come from Paul, and he found a way to win. So nice job by Korda to get the job done there, and nice job, once again, winning by a big enough margin to not force a tiebreak for us. So there you go. Now, for the other match, not really much else to add. Our 11-1 Paul outright went up in flames, which sucks. But either way, Korda earned the win. Paul, once he was up a break early in the second, you figured, okay, he had some momentum. Maybe Korda would save some energy, and maybe he would roll over. And then Paul immediately got broken in the following game. And at that point, you could tell that it was going to be a really long second set for Paul. Well, long set for Paul, short set for Korda because he was going to coast, and that's what happened in the second set. But either way, Paul could not handle the actual weather, and that was really the story of the entire match. I'm not going to say that Korda didn't do anything because he did, once again, apply constant pressure by simply keeping the ball in play. But it felt like the actual match was fully decided by Paul's racket and not in a good way. He was really underwhelming in the second set, and he had the love 40. It looked like Korda was going to choke again because he was serving for the title, and you kind of figured that Korda would find a way to make it an adventure, and he did because Paul went up love 40. He had 4 break points, and he did not convert any of them, and then Korda eventually held as he ended up winning. So nice job by him. But either way, once again, moving on to the more competitive final that we saw in Rio, a match that actually just ended. Etcheverry ended up beating Tabilo, lost the first set. He was down a break as well into the second set. Tabilo is going to be kicking himself because he had a golden opportunity to win another title. Because Tabilo, just to set the actual scene here, Tabilo was up a set and a break, and then he ended up giving the break right back. Plus, he had 2 break point chances in the 4-4 game. So Tabilo had 2 opportunities to serve it out, actually, and he ended up not converting the breakpoint chances. Very long game. Etcheverry finally held. Then you ended up seeing Etcheverry kind of dominate the tiebreak, and then he ended up winning the third set. Tabilo hurt his back. He ended up seeing the trainer halfway through. You could tell that he didn't have the same oomph on his serve. Managed to hold with the exception of the second service game, which he got broken in the third set. But Etcheverry found a way to win. Now, it was his first ever title, and damn, did he earn it. Because a reminder, they did not finish the semis on Saturday. So Etcheverry had to finish the second set and play a third set against Capriva, then play 3 sets against Tabilo in the same day with roughly 2 hours in between each match. So once again, Etcheverry played roughly 5.5 hours of tennis on Sunday, and he found a way to win. So I'm shocked his body held up well, but either way, I thought that after losing the first set, he might be cooked. He was down a break immediately. Looked like he was naturally running out of gas because the third set against Capriva by itself took about an hour and 40. The third set took an hour and 48. Not to mention the fact they had to end the second set, which was 5-4 at the time. And then he had 3 setters really in almost every round. It felt like Etcheverry had a marathon throughout the entire event. Etcheverry ended up having actually straight set wins against Faria and against Galbus. Faria, though, was a war. That was a straight set 7-6, 6-4. So that match did take some time, though. It took about 2 hours. Had a 3-setter against Comasagna in the first round. But either way, once again, he played roughly 4 and change sets of tennis in one day to win his first ever ATP title. So congratulations to him. That's going to set up a challenge for me because now I have to discover who the second best player on tour is to not have an ATP title. Of course, number 1 is Davidovich Fokina, who is a landslide, in my opinion, the best player of all time to never win a professional title. But number 2 now is up for grabs. I got to figure out who it's going to be because Etcheverry was that guy for a while, and now he's not. So maybe some of you can help me name some guys who have not won a title yet on the ATP Tour, and we'll go from there. But Etcheverry was the veteran that had not won, and he finally did. So good for him. Happy that he was able to get the job done. I'm a bit shocked that Tabilo choked it, to be honest. But either way, a very impressive win and a phenomenal day of tennis if you're interested in clay, because you got 4 and change sets from one guy en route to a title win while playing roughly 5+ hours of tennis in one day. So there we go. Once again, nice win there for Etcheverry. And I'm assuming, no surprise at all, he's probably going to be taking some weeks off because he played a ton of tennis in Rio. But either way, nice job by him, and we'll see what happens moving forward. Now, nothing else really add there. Tabilo, I'm assuming he's going to drop out as well after playing 3+ hours, and he hurt his back in the third set. So I'm assuming Tabilo will be taking the week off. We'll see. If not, I will probably fade him because I doubt he'll be able to recover while also traveling. So not a great spot there. But either way, once again, a phenomenal day of clay tennis. And hopefully the event in Santiago has anywhere near the same amount of drama that we saw in Rio on Sunday. Anyway, before we move on into the actual breakdown of the 3 events for the upcoming week. A reminder that we are brought to you by our sponsor, Kalshi. So it's a real money prediction market available in every state. Tons of trading options for different sports, including, for example, tennis. They also have MMA. They also have baseball. They have basketball. They have all the sports you can think of. And a reminder, besides sports, they also have politics, entertainment, and even the weather. And if you want to join the platform, a nice incentive for you, get $20 for free when you sign up with the code SGPN. That's Kalshi, Kalshi, code SGPN. For free, $20 to sign up at Kalshi. We're also brought to you by Rhythm. So Rhythm is, once again, a great platform to help you with model building. They've been on a heater for college basketball and the NBA recently. Super easy to sign up and run predictions off house models. You can also build your own model or use the leaderboard to help you find models that have been working for other people, and you can use them yourself. But a reminder, if you want to go premium with your membership, use the code SGPN25. We download the app, and you'll get a nice 25% off your first month. That's Rhythm, RATHMM, code SGPN25 for a quarter first month at Rhythm. Welcome back, everyone, to the Tennis Game Podcast. Finished going through the recap of what happened on Sunday in Rio and in Delray. Once again, Korda and Echeverry winning titles. Time to move on into the 3 events for the upcoming week. So we're going to do the hard court events first. Coincidentally, the 2 events that do have quarter odds. So we're going to start off with Dubai because that does have a very early start time. A reminder, Acapulco, all the Mexican tournaments start very late in terms of matches if you're on the East Coast. So Dubai does start very early in the mornings. Keep that in mind. A lot of hardcore tennis throughout the day. Now, for the recent winners, a reminder, Tsitsipas won last year. He changed rackets and ended up having himself a great week, beating Felix in the final. Humbert beat Bublik the year prior. Medvedev beat Rublev the year before that. And Rublev beat Vesely in the year before that. Shocking that Vesely made a final, but either way, nice job by these guys for winning recently, and we'll see if any of them can win again. Now, for the first quarter, we do have odds here. Felix is the favorite at plus 140. Fees is plus 375 off of the loss in Doha. That was on Saturday, so there is an extra day off for him by comparison, for example, to Rio and to Delray, where they did not play on he did not play on Sunday. So there was an extra day off, but he questioned if he'll be fatigued or not. So we'll see. Shapo is at 5-1. Pericard at 550. Leheshka is at 650. Busta is at 16-1. Zhang is at 16-1. And Achargu is last at around 50-1. Not going to, once again, give you a case for Achargu. He's got no chance at winning, so I'm not really going to bother. Now, for the actual court information, I will point out that looking at the recent winners of the event, first of all, a lot of high-profile names. Tsitsipas, Felix, Humbert is, a good hardcore player. Bublik, Medvedev, Rublev. So once again, a lot of guys with firepower and a lot of guys who have been successful in the past. Now, I will point out Dubai is a pretty fast hard court. So once again, serving does have its advantages for this event. So keep that in mind. Not going to be a slow hard court by any means. It should be a pretty fast-paced hard court for the upcoming week in Dubai. Now, I do want to point out that for the actual path so far, yes, Felix did get injured in the final in Rotterdam against de Minaur. I'm not going to read too much into it. We know that he played a bunch of tennis. He won the week prior in Montpellier, ran out of gas, and now I do think he'll look fine after taking the week off last week. Now, I do want to point out that Dubai, according to the serve index here, is once again a bit above average, so keep an eye out for that. But based on the recent winners, having a good serve and having some firepower can definitely benefit you. And we saw Tsitsipas showcase that as he actually won a title because he got hot for 1 week. The point is, Felix is back here, and we do know that he is a very solid hardcore player, mostly indoor, but still, we know the firepower is there. Fees has a very interesting path as the second favorite because he plays Leheshka. Again, a reminder, Leheshka got buried by him in the semis, so we'll see if he can get some revenge here. But you have Shapo taking on Busta in the first round. Busta, I think, is past his prime, but a nice job getting through qualifying. And as for Felix, Zhang can be a bit tricky because he does have a lot of firepower. He kind of went off the grid and then reinvented himself, so we'll see how he looks here. But I do think that Felix has a very easy draw here. Fees against Leheshka in the first round does have me eliminating both Fees and Leheshka automatically. Not a great draw for either guy for an immediate rematch. So pass on those guys. Shapo, I don't trust enough, but I think that he could have a decent path if you end up seeing Fees and Leheshka kill each other in the first round. Point is, though, I think Felix's draw is favorable. Opposite side of the bracket of the quarter, as Shapo, Fees, and Leheshka. Pericard serve can do damage here, but we all know Pericard has not been very good this season, and Felix does have the overall serve to really make him, I don't want to say unbreakable against Pericard, but very tough to break. And we do know that he has the length to also return a little bit against Pericard as well. I see a very easy path for Felix. Yes, I understand that you could argue he might struggle in terms of fitness if he's not fully healthy after Rotterdam. But he took the week off that he needed. I think that the time off is going to help. I'll go for him here at plus 140. I do like the draw quite a bit for Felix. Moving on into the second quarter. This is the Medvedev quarter. Now he's at plus 140. Kashanov's at 3-1. You have Wawrinka at 550. Brooksby at 6-1. Bergs at 7-1, Shang at 10-1, Shevchenko 33-1, and Hassan at 66-1. Now, for the favorite here, reminder that Medvedev has won this title before. He's been very good in Dubai in the past. Now, Medvedev has Shang in the first round, followed by Wawrinka most likely. Then you're looking at Kashanov and having the other side of the bracket with Shevchenko, Brooksby, and Bergs. Now, look, Medvedev, we know, won a title earlier this year. Since then, he has not been that great. We saw him win a couple of rounds in Australia. Then, of course, he ended up losing to Tien handily. We saw him in Doha losing straight sets to Tsitsipas, which is not a great look. Lost immediately to Humbert in Rotterdam. So after winning Brisbane and winning the first three matches in the Australian Open, he's not been very good. Now, I do think the draw is favorable. I do want to point out Kashanov, I thought about. He looked good against Alcaraz. But Shevchenko can be tricky. Brooksby and Bergs can be tricky as well. Not a fan of the draw for Kashanov. And Kashanov in general is not really a guy who I've been wanting to back over the last year from an outright perspective. He's just not that reliable, even with him having a very competitive matchup against Alcaraz, which he never broken for the record. He still went to 3 sets against Moshizuki. He still had a couple of competitive matches anyway against Fucsovics, for example. It wasn't smooth sailing before the match against Alcaraz, so I'm not going to pick Kashanov to suddenly be a dark horse candidate to win the event. I think if all things are clicking, he has an argument, but I'm not going to pick him. I don't think the price is high enough. I think that Kashanov's a guy who I think needs to be at this point at least 4 or 5-1 for me to consider it. And at 3-1, I'm not really that interested. I think his draw is manageable, but not exactly easy. And I do think that Medvedev has an easier path. Now, I will point out that Medvedev in the head-to-head is currently 7-2 lifetime against Kashanov. In fact, Medvedev, for the record, has won, let me just pull up the math here. He has won, I believe, 6 of the last 7 between the two of them. So not really interested in picking Kashanov when Medvedev has owned him. Couple of 3-setters involved, so not exactly the easiest wins, but Medvedev has won 6 of the last 7. So based on that, so let me just make sure that's not 7 of the last 8. Yeah, he's won 6 of the last 7. So once again, I do think that Medvedev has his number. Not going to bother. No point in taking Kashanov if I don't think he can actually beat Medvedev. I'll go for chalk here at plus 140. Yes, he has not been very good recently. I get it. But the draw is manageable. It really is. I mean, you're looking at a path of Shang, who he just beat in straight sets in Doha, Wawrinka, who I think could give him some problems. We know that he's past his prime. He should beat Hassan easily in the first round. But I think Medvedev will wear Wawrinka down. But if that ends up being an upset, not a total shock, but it'll be a massive favorite pre-match. So I like the path for Medvedev. I'll go for him there in the second quarter. Moving on to the third quarter. This is going to be the more open one. For this quarter, you have Rublev at plus 260. So he is the biggest odds favorite. Or I should say he has the largest price for a favorite here in the quarter. Plus 260, you have Draper at 333. You have Humbert at 450. Tsitsipas defending champion at 550. Morozin is at 7-1. Halles at 10-1. Rinderknech at 10-1. And Royer is at 14-1. Now, for this actual path here, Rublev, once again, a former finalist and a former champion. A reminder, he was in the semis here a couple of years ago and got defaulted for cursing out a line judge. And that's how that whole side story started with therapy and all the whatever. Because that was against Bublik in the semis and he had to default. So once again, he might have lost that match anyway, but this was the event where Rublev lost his mind and he got ejected from the event. So overall, he has been quite good here, though. Couple of semis appearances, couple of final appearances, and a title. We'll see how he looks in this one. Now, for the actual draw for Rublev, it's not bad, but not easy. So Rublev has Royer in the first round. We saw Royer give a little bit of a scare to Alcaraz in the second set before imploding. But Royer can be tricky. I think Rublev will beat him, though. I think that his firepower in this environment will be too good. However, Humbert or Tsitsipas in round 2 could be difficult. Now, I will point out that Rublev against Humbert for the head-to-head has been very good. Rublev is actually, well, he's 3-2 in the head-to-head, but he has won 2 of the last 3. So I want to point that out. In fact, Rublev has won 4 of the 5 career meetings on hard court. One of the meetings was on grass that Humbert did win back in 2021. But the point is, Rublev has been good against Humbert. So I do think if that's the matchup, I think I would pick Rublev to win that one. Tsitsipas, we saw have some moments last week. We saw him, for example, beat Medvedev in straight sets. That head-to-head's a bit closer, as it is currently 6-6. That is a bit closer, but we have seen Rublev win 2 straight meetings against Tsitsipas. And the fact is, they faced off one time this year in Doha. We just saw them play, and Rublev won in straight sets. So the issue that Tsitsipas has is the return game, which we know is underwhelming. I do think that Tsitsipas will struggle in the Humbert matchup with the lefty-righty aspect. Humbert should really just keep hitting cross-court, forehand versus Tsitsipas one-hand backhand, which should give Humbert an advantage. But with Tsitsipas and Humbert playing against each other in round 1, I'm not really interested in taking either of them. I think similar to what I said earlier about the first-round matchup between Fils and Leheshka, it's too tricky for the first round, so I will pass on both of them. Not interested. Now, I will point out, I did mention it, but I'll go a bit more into detail. Draper is back in action. Draper has not played an ATP event for a while. He did play a little Davis Cup action, which took no stress at all because he had a very easy match against Norway, which he coasted in, as he ended up beating Durasovic as he won 6-2, 6-2. Took an hour on the dot. So once again, that's the only time he's played since the US Open last year, as he beat Gomez in 4, then he had a walkover loss against Bergs. He played 1 match since, but he looked very good. Then again, it was about 3 weeks ago, and it was against a complete unknown. So not really sure if he's ready for this, but I do want to point out the draw in itself is pretty nice. Now, Halles, we saw have a decent run here last year. Halles went through qualifying. We saw him make an okay run in last week's event. Did end up going to a breaker against Fils in the second round, ended up losing in straight sets, but Fils made it to the final, so I guess that aged pretty well. Draper, though, I think the draw is okay. Morozin against Rinderknech in the first round is very tough, too. I think either guy could win. I would pick Morozin, but that could go either way. I think Draper's path, though, is not that bad, and I think the odds are pretty good. If Draper is going to be in form, he's a top 10 caliber player. Now, there was a bit of a layoff there, playing 1 match since basically last August, and 0 ATP matches is annoying. But plus 333, I think, is actually worth something. So I am going to take a little shot there at 333 with the upside pending. Now, for that reason, I did go pretty chalky again. I have Rublev at 260, and I do have Draper at 333. I think that the quarter in itself could be open to could be a long shot, but I do think with the tough matchups between Morozin and Rinderknech and Humbert against Tsitsipas in round 1, I just thought that the prices weren't reflecting how difficult those first-round matches were. So instead of that, I'll avoid those 4 guys entirely. Give me Rublev and Draper as my 2 choices for the third quarter. Moving on into the fourth quarter, the Bublik quarter at plus 210. We saw him lose handily to Felix in Rotterdam, and he did not play since. Now he's at plus 210. Mensik is at 3-1, who we saw lose in the semis of Doha after beating Sinner in the quarterfinals. Now you have Hurkacz at 550. You have Majcik at 7-1. Greek Sport 750, who ended up beating Medvedev here last year. You saw Popperin at 9-1, Struff at 11-1, and Virtanen at 14-1. Now, for the actual path here, Mensik, I'm going to be fading. I'm not interested. Now, yes, I understand he looked very good last week. I also remember that he pulled his hamstring in the second set tiebreak against Fils. Maybe he'll recover, but either way, I did notice he tweaked something, and he kept reaching for it in that tiebreak, and it's why he kind of ran out of gas there at the end. So Fils, I'm not interested. Mensik, I'm going to pass on. Not a great draw either. I know Hurkacz has been underwhelming so far this season, but I do think that it's not exactly a great draw for Mensik if he's not 100%. And once again, he played a very physical match against Sinner in the quarters, followed up with what could have been an injury against Fees. So not interested. I'm expecting a bit of a let-up here for Mensik, and I think that Hurkacz, who has been really bad at the start of the season, is still tricky, a guy you don't want to play on fast hard courts. I think an upset could be in the works there, so I'm going to pass on Mensik. Not a great overall draw for him. Now, I do think the Bublik draw is interesting because Struff has given him problems in the past. Bublik did beat him in 3 sets in Rotterdam a couple weeks ago, but that could be a potential upset, and we know Griekspoor is a guy who we don't exactly trust. He could lose to Virtanen in the first round. Wouldn't totally shock me. So once again, I'm going to go with a little bit of chalk, but I did go with a bit of a longer shot as well. I have Bublik at plus 210. Said before, he did reach a final here. He's been good in Dubai. He's been good in general. And I do like the fact after losing to Felix in Rotterdam, he took a week off. So like Felix, I'm going to back him. I think the time off will help him recover. And I do think that he will be able to make a deep run once again. I like the price. I'll go for Bublik here at plus 210. However, I am going to go with Hurkacz at plus 550. If he does get past Mensik, I think Popperin, who's been a mess all season, and Majcik, who can be tricky, but I think Hurkacz would be favored against both guys. So if Hurkacz ends up finding himself in a spot where he ends up beating a potentially compromised Mensik or Mensik drops out, there's some value on Hurkacz at plus 550. For reference, by the way, Mensik is only minus 140 in that match against Hurkacz, so not exactly a big favorite by any means. And I think that you can find an opportunity where a good serve can carry Hurkacz into the semis. So I'm going to go for him here as the longer shot at 550. Mensik I'm going to pass on. I think it is a good spot. I see a DJ saying that Mensik might have pulled out already. If he did, then make sure you jump on Hurkacz because I still see Mensik listed. So once again, if Mensik did end up pulling out, you can make an argument that it's a better opportunity to grab Hurkacz right now because the odds are still posted. So if you're on Bet365, take Hurkacz to win the quarter because he does not have Mensik in the first round, and you're inheriting a better draw. To quickly see if he is going to be playing in Dubai, let me quickly see. I have not seen any updates on that. So keep an eye out for it. If that is true, though, and if I am behind on the news, then once again, you can find yourself getting a much better price on Hurkacz right now than it will be by the time the event starts. But let me quickly just see if I can confirm on Twitter if he is playing in Dubai. I don't see anything. So as far as I know, I don't see anything of form dropping out. So we'll see what happens. It would not shock me if he did because I did notice the injury in the breaker against Fees. But I am going to go with those two guys as my choices for the fourth quarter. Moving on to the outrights to actually win the event. So starting off with the odds, Felix at plus 450, Bublik at 6-1, you have Medvedev at 750, Mensik at 11-1, Draper at 11-1, Rublev at 12-1, Fees at 14-1, Leheshka 16-1, Humbert 18-1, Gashanov is 18-1 as well, Hurkacz 20-1, Tsitsipas 22-1, Makic, who I believe dropped out, but he's still listed right now. So once again, just as a reminder, you can find a lot of value simply by looking at the outright markets and seeing which books have been too slow to adjust. Because Makic did drop out. That I know for a fact. And DraftKings still has him listed. So once again, you can find opportunities just by paying attention to find better odds on certain quarters, etc., simply by following current events on who dropped out of events. So keep that in mind. But Makic, I believe, dropped out, and he's still listed. So capitalize on that potentially. But moving on for the other guys here, I see Wawrinka 30-1, which is insanely low, by the way, for a guy who's that old at 30-1. Okay, sure. Griekspoor 35-1, Morozin 35-1, Shapo 35-1. You kind of get the point. So getting into the actual players that I have here, I went pretty chalky. I'm not going to pretend that I have a long shot in this event. I do not. I said before in the recent winners, you have seen a decent amount of chalk. Now, Tsitsipas was not one of the favorites, but of course, he is a former top 5 guy in the world. We know that he has upside there, but Felix made the final. Humbert's been a very solid top 20 caliber player for a while. Bublik, we know, is now top 10. Medvedev's been number 1 before. Rublev's been top 10 before. We have seen a lot of high-profile guys who have won the title or reached the final. I went chalk here. I went with a couple of favorites. I did pick Felix at 5-1. I do think the first quarter is a very favorable quarter for him. Even the half, Medvedev, I do think can be on upset alert potentially, but I think Felix, with his overall game this season, I think has a good enough path to once again make a deep run. And he made the final here last year, so I know that his game does translate. I have Felix at 5-1 as my first choice. Even though he can be annoying, and I just mentioned a second ago, he could in theory get upset. I think Medvedev at 750 is too good of a number. He has been so damn good in Dubai in the past. As a reminder, he did end up winning the title here a couple years ago. He's 10-2 lifetime in Dubai, and I think his quarter once again is manageable. It's not exactly the easiest quarter in the world, but if you look at the names that are in his quarter, it's mainly on the bottom half, with Khachanov being the main threat. And Medvedev, I said before, has owned Khachanov in their careers. So I like the draw for Medvedev. I think that he has a very generous path as far as I'm concerned. And I think that he'll be able to make it into the semis. And from that point forward, we'll see what happens. But I like his odds at 750. Think it's a little bit too long for a former champion with a 10-2 lifetime record here, with a pretty manageable quarter. Last but not least, I will go with the head case who got ejected a couple years ago from here. I do have Rublev at plus 1,200. Former champion, he's been good in general, and I do think that he showed some flashes in Doha. Yes, he lost to Alcaraz, but I'll tell you what, he did break Alcaraz multiple times, so I do like how he's seeing the ball right now. The path's fine. I know Humbert or Tsitsipas could be tricky in round 2. He just beat Tsitsipas in straight sets, so I think he should be able to handle him, and he has been good against Humbert in the past. Draper, bit of a question mark in terms of his overall fitness and beyond, because he's played one overall match since the U.S. Open last year. I like the Rublev path in general, and I think that it makes sense for him to have a shorter price than 12-1. I'll grab him. If you want to avoid him because he's a head case, I get it, but I think 12-1 is a bit long. I'll take him there as my third outright. Now, moving on into Acapulco. So for this one, recent winners, Makic beat Fekina in the final last year. De Minaur beat Ruud the year prior. De Minaur beat Paul the year before that. And Nadal beat Norrie the year before that. So unlike what we just talked about in Dubai, Acapulco does play a bit slower. So keep that in mind. That's why De Minaur has been so good here, historically speaking. It feels like a clay event at times. It is a very, very slow hard court. So you're going to see a bunch of long rallies, not many big servers doing damage. Makic is kind of an exception. But I said before, De Minaur won a couple of titles here. Norrie made a final. Paul made a final. Fekina made a final. Ruud made a final. We've seen a lot of guys who thrive in the long rally game have success here in Acapulco. So keep that in mind. Now, for the first quarter here, this is the Zverev quarter of the event. So for this one, you have Zverev at minus 125. Dimitrov is at 450. Norrie is at 550. Kekmanovic is at 850. Schoolcat 16-1. Mutet 16-1. Ottmane 16-1. And Joder is at 18-1. Now, Zverev, I think, should end up winning this quarter. He has won the title here before. It makes sense. I just said a second ago, it is a very slow, hard court that is right up Zverev's alley, who we know likes to be conservative, doesn't really like to go for a lot, and can be very passive. This is the court for him because he's going to be passive. So I think that Zverev has a pretty good overall quarter in general. Not many guys that I think that are that threatening. Mutet is in round 1, which can be an annoying guy to face off a layoff, but I think that Zverev will wear him down over time. He's 2 in a lifetime against Mutet. Should be Kekmanovic. I think the question here is there anybody else worth the shot? I'll tell you what, though, I think Joder at 18-1 is interesting, but I don't see him beating Zverev. I think he could, in theory, make it to the quarterfinals. That's why I'm kind of avoiding Norrie, because I think Norrie could lose to Joder in the first round. The odds are very close for that match. Dimitrov, though, being the second favorite, despite barely playing tennis for the last couple of months after Wimbledon last year, is laughable. I understand Dimitrov has the overall game in theory to have success here, but he's barely played tennis. I think he could lose to Ottmane in round 1. Not interested. I think this is going to be a very, very interesting event for Zverev. We'll see how he looks after the layoff from the Aussie Open. But I do think it's a court that benefits his skill set. It's why he's won here before, and I don't see anybody really out-rallying Zverev for what could be a 3-hour marathon if you're going to do so. So I got Zverev here by himself at minus 125. I think the quarter is pretty weak. Dimitrov being the second favorite is hilarious in 2026. Give me Zverev at minus 125 is my only choice for the first quarter. Moving on to the second quarter. This is a bit more open. You have Ruud at 175, Caboli at 240, Spizzirri at 375. You have Manarino at 7-1, Duckworth at 850. You have a couple of long shots as well who have no chance. So Ruud, I said before, made the final in the past. We did see him run out of gas there against Korda in Delray, but Korda won the event, so I guess that aged pretty well. Now he has Manarino or Spizzirri in the second round. Not an easy match for Manarino and Spizzirri in general in the first round. We saw Spizzirri bury Manarino earlier this season. Then Manarino kind of found his form in Montpellier. So I think the rematch could be interesting. Actually, we saw Spizzirri lose to Pennington Jones in Dallas, so I think that could be a potential win for Manarino. We'll see. But I'm going to skip both guys there because I'm not interested in what could be a very interesting toss-up for the first round. So I went chalky. To be honest, not many great players in this quarter. Manarino could be interesting, but Spizzirri in the first round is not ideal. If Manarino was in the Caboli section, I might have considered taking him at 7-1. But Spizzirri could be tricky. I'm not going to bother. I passed on those two guys. Having said that, Duckworth, I think, is just not very good. You have Pacheco Mendez, who's the local Mexican guy, who shows up here every year, occasionally wins one match, and then gets buried. That's usually how it goes for him. I don't see him doing much here. I went chalk by a process of elimination. I have Ruud at 175 and Caboli at 240. Yes, I know Caboli can be a head case. He did make the semis in Delray. So I like how he played in the event in itself. But the quarter is very weak here. I'll take the two guys that I think have the only chance of winning the quarter, and I'll just potentially go for an arbitrage here. So give me the second quarter with Ruud and Caboli as my two choices. Moving on to the third quarter. This is also pretty open. Fekina is the defending runner-up. He is the favorite here at plus 150. Kovacevic is at 5-1. Korda is at 5-1. Walton is at 550. Tiafoe is at 650. Borges is 10-1. Altmaier is at 14-1. And Bellucci is at 22-1. So first things first, Bellucci and Altmaier have been god-awful all season. That is an automatic elimination. I'm not taking either guy, so that is not going to happen. Now, I want to point out that we saw Kovacevic make a final in Mexico last year in Los Cabos, lost to Chapo in the final. Having said that, Los Cabos does play faster than Acapulco. So even though he can handle the humidity and the overall environment weather-wise, it's still a different court entirely. I do think the slower-paced courts will hurt him in this event, so I don't like Kovacevic in this quarter at all, especially for what is a tricky matchup in the first round against Walton. Walton beat Kovacevic here last year in 3 sets, and for the odds, it is actually Kovacevic at about minus 140. So not exactly an easy match in the first round, and Walton just beat him in this event last year. So I'm eliminating the second favorite at 5-1. Korda also is at 5-1. Will he be fatigued? Maybe. It was a pretty easy final because Paul imploded. But I question the trip to Mexico. It's not exactly a great travel spot. I do think Korda has an easy matchup against Bellucci in round 1, but I think I would take Fekina against him in a potential second-round match. So I'm going to go with chalk. I have Fekina at 150, a very weak quarter in general. However, this is Fekina we're talking about, so I cannot take him by himself. I said a second ago that I do think Kovacevic is vulnerable in this environment, so I'm going to go with a guy who we saw punt a match royally in the quarterfinals of Delray. But I like the price. Tiafoe at 650, I think is a bit too long. Tiafoe, we know, likes to play on slower-paced courts. He does have the variety. He has a pretty good serve in general. I think Tiafoe could make a run. Not to actually win the whole event, obviously. But I do think if Tiafoe ends up making it into the quarters and beats the likes of Borges and potentially Walton or Kovacevic, I would not be shocked. So I think that 650 is a long price. For reference, I think Tiafoe would be favored against Kovacevic in the second round. So I find it weird Kovacevic is a shorter price than Tiafoe to win the quarter. The math is not mathing. I'll go for Tiafoe here at 650 as my second choice for the third quarter. Moving on to the fourth quarter. This is the de Minaur quarter. He's at about minus 120. I see a couple of minus 150s out there. So it's starting to go up, but I did find a minus 120. I see Vatra at 350, Monfils at 7-1, Nakashima at 7-1, and DeZumer at 16-1. Simply put, I think this is a phenomenal environment for de Minaur, who we know can be a brick wall. It's a slow, hard court. I think it's perfect for de Minaur to go wall mode. And these guys that he's supposed to be against, like Vacharat and Nakashima, I think they're better on faster hard courts because their serve is usually their biggest weapon. But in a rally game, have fun trying to hit past de Minaur for about 3 hours. I don't see that happening. I got de Minaur by himself. I think that he is going to win the quarter. I think he's very, very comfortable here in the environment and with the court speeds too. I think he's the guy I'll go with. I like him by himself at minus 120. Two-time champion. He's very dangerous here. Good enough for me. I'll go, and he's off the title in Rotterdam, so he's in great form. I'll go for de Minaur at minus 120 as my only choice for the fourth quarter. Moving on to the outrights to actually win the event. So for the odds, you have Zverev as the favorite at around plus 220, give or take. You have de Minaur at around plus 240. Fokina is at 9-1. Ruud at 11-1. Caboli at 12-1. Dimitrov at 18-1. Vatra at 18-1. Spizzirri at 22-1. Nori 22-1. Kovacevic 30-1. Manarino 30-1. Walton is at 30-1. Monfils at 35-1. Nakashima 35-1. Korda 35-1. Tiafoe 40-1. You kind of get the point. So for the actual odds here, I do think it will be pretty chalky. Mentioning the recent winners once again, Makic and Fokina was a bit surprising, but you have a couple of usual faces. De Minaur, you have Ruud, you have Paul, Nadal won. The point is, I do think with the actual skill set the two favorites possess in the rally tolerance game, I think it will be very tough to beat Zverev and or de Minaur in a 2 out of 3 set war, which should take roughly 3 hours if you're going to end up pulling it off. I went pure chalk. I found a 250 on Zverev. I'll grab that, and I will go de Minaur at 275. I think both guys will be walls. I think both guys will win, and I don't see much competition. Fokina, I know, made the final last year, but if he's the third favorite in your event, a reminder, he's never won a title before, and you have the fourth favorite being Ruud, who ran at a gas in Del Rey against Korda. I think you got problems in terms of its field depth. I think it will be very chalky. I think we will get Zverev and de Minaur in the final. If you want to go for the exact final lists, I know there's a market for that. I'll go chalk here. Give me Zverev at 250. Give me de Minaur at 275. Not really interested for any other long shots. So give me those two guys as pure chalk as my two choices for Acapulco. Moving on to Santiago, the only clay event of the entire week. This one, I do have a serious long shot for the event as a spoiler. Now, for the recent winners, it's been mostly, I'd say, Argentinian for the sake of finalists. Now, we saw De Gea beat Baez in 3 last year. We saw Baez beat Tabilo the year before that. We saw Jari beat Echeverry the year before that. We saw Martinez beat Baez, and we saw Garin beat Bagnes. So a common theme here, an Argentinian has reached 5 straight title matches. Baez reached 2 in a row. You had Echeverry, you had Baez again, and you had Bagnes. So we have seen Argentinians have success here in the past. Will that continue? We'll see. But the point is, keep an eye out for the Argentinians. They're always dangerous in this tournament. Now, for the outrights, we have no quarters once again. For the actual favorites, you have Cerundolo at about 375 after retiring against Tirante in the last event in Rio. Baez at 650 off the loss to Faria. Darderi, 7-1 off the loss to JM Cerundolo. Garin is the Chilean, of course, who's going to be the favorite Chilean to win at 8-1, even though he might be washed, who knows. Echeverry off the title at 8-1, no chance in hell. I think he might drop out. So I would be shocked if Echeverry actually made a deep run here after playing 5+ hours on Sunday. I do not see him packing up and traveling to Chile. I don't see that happening. I think he will drop out of the event. Comasagna at 8-1. Berrettini had a decent run there to the quarters before losing to Buse in Rio. He's at 8-1. Carabelli at 11-1. Tabilo at 12-1. He had a back issue. I think he will drop out. Actually, he is Chilean. that makes it tricky because I really think Tabilo might be fool's gold here. The back was bothering him. He might try to tough it out, but there's no chance I back him in this event after having a marathon final in Rio. I think it's a really bad spot. I see Henry mentioning the opposite. Look, I think I would have taken Tabilo if he did not choke in the final set and a half against Echeverry in the final on Sunday. But with the back issue, he called for the trainer. He wasn't moving as well. I'm going to pass. I think Tabilo is a guy who a bunch of people will give out to win, and I think he might end up underachieving. I'm going to pass. I think it's a really bad scheduling spot. I understand that there will be a good home crowd atmosphere, but I'm really not liking the spot for Tabilo. I'm going to pass. I'm really not interested for that price at 12-1. I'm moving on to the other guys. Buse at 14-1. He ended up losing in the semis to Tabilo in Rio. Hanfman at 22-1. Devone 25-1. Prismic at 25-1. If you want to go for some other guys who are, I'd say, name noteworthy. Capriva, who had a very good run in Rio, is at 33-1. If you want to go for Jari, he's the other Chilean at 40-1. Couple other guys, but you kind of get the drill. So for this actual event in itself, first of all, I think Cerundolo is a guy who I'm going to pass on. He had an injury, ended up dropping out in Rio. I know he just won the title in Buenos Aires. You could argue it was a tactical stoppage because he just won a title and he wasn't ready to immediately recover. Then again, I think the price is too cheap. I think Barachuga can maybe keep it interesting in a potential second-round matchup. Berrettini maybe can beat him, who knows. But the price is too cheap for a guy that just left his last event via retirement. I'm going to pass. Now, Baez and Darderi have been guys we've been backing for the last couple of clay events, and both of them did not work out. If you hedged in Buenos Aires, you actually ended up making some money because Darderi was a favorite against Cerundolo in the final. So you might have made some money there. But Baez laying an egg against Faria as a lucky loser was shocking in Rio. Now, for the event in itself, I think I have to do it. I am going to go for both Baez and Darderi again. If they don't get the job done, I'm going to have to pass moving forward, but I think that they are a big enough price that is worth consideration. For the actual draw here for Baez, he's going to be in the third quarter, has a bye, followed by Green or JM Cerundolo. He owns JM Cerundolo in their careers. Same quarter as Tabilo, who I think might be totally gassed. We'll see how that goes. He has Barrios Vera in the first round. I know Barrios Vera is not exactly great. He gave Berrettini a run for his money, though, in Rio. But if Tabilo is actually compromised, I do think it could be a pretty good draw for Baez in general, because Tabilo might be running on fumes, so keep an eye out for that. But I like the actual draw there. He's in the same half as Darderi, but the other main threat there is going to be Comasagna or Martinez, who play each other in the first round. So it's mainly a tactical play where I'm going for the two guys in the bottom half, and I think one of them will represent the bottom half in the final. So it's more of a strategy. I'm avoiding some of the top odds guys like Cerundolo, for example, and Berrettini, for example. But I think they're looking at Baez, who has a pretty good third quarter. If you agree with me that Tabilo will be struggling physically in this environment, and Darderi in the fourth quarter, he has Capriva or Navone in round two, which could be tricky, but I think Capriva's lack of a serve will hurt him against Darderi. Plus, fatigue can play a factor. Navone can be tricky as well. Not a great first-round match for Capriva, and a battle of two guys who cannot serve at all. That could be an absolute war. That might take 3+ hours. So I think Darderi off the bye should be able to capitalize on what could be a very fatigued winner in that first-round match. Comasagna and Martinez might kill each other as well in the first round. I think Darderi and Baez have good paths. I really did not want to take both of them entering the event after what happened in Rio, but I do think both guys have good enough quarters in terms of the path for me to be required to take them. So I'm going to go for Baez at 7-1, and I'll go for Darderi at 7-1. However, unlike Rio, I did open it up a bit more to a couple of longer shots. This one's not really that big of a long shot, but I do like the actual draw, and I like how he played a couple weeks ago. We saw him have a pretty good run in Buenos Aires. I am going to go for Carabelli at around 12-1. This quarter is not the easiest. He has Lajovic or Hanfman in the second round. Then you have what could be a very interesting quartet of players. Etcheverry against Soto in the first round. I think Etcheverry drops out, to be clear. Then you have Jari or Prismic, two guys who I'm really not impressed by. I know Jari won the title here last year. He's been mainly a challenger player since beating Fonseca in Wimbledon last year. So he's been kind of irrelevant for the last 8 months or so. I think Carabelli, if he gets past Lajovic or Hanfman, has a pretty good draw, assuming Etcheverry drops out. So I'll take him at 12-1. I think he has a very interesting skill set for these courts, and I do think that he's a guy who will be able to frustrate oppositions. He's a very underrated clay player, and I do think 12-1 is a good price. I'll take him there as my third choice. And for the fourth choice, this is solely based on a Tabilo fade. I think Tabilo, fatigue-wise, could be struggling. He does not have a bye in this as well. They might manipulate the schedule to not give him day one action, but I do think Tabilo, if he's going to be on upset alert, then maybe there's an opening in that section. Yes, I have buys already, but you know what? I will go for a super long shot, a guy who actually looked pretty good last week. I know there was an injury involved, but he beat Cerundolo. Tarante's at 66-1. I think that's a very good price for Tarante, who's a good clay player. I think that if you're looking at a guy who can, in theory, beat Baez, they've played before. I'm not saying he's going to beat Baez, but if you think Baez could lose early again, and you kind of want to hedge your bet a little bit, I think Tarante is intriguing. Even if Tabilo ends up playing in this event, a reminder, Tarante and Tabilo played each other in Rio about 2 days ago, and it went to a third set. Each of the first two sets were breakers, and Tabilo won in 3. So Tarante already gave Tabilo, a healthy Tabilo, a series run for his money, and now they're in the same quarter again. 66-1, I think, is just a very big price for a guy that gave Tabilo a serious scare in the last event, and a guy who has Bousse in the first round. I know Bousse has been good. He's played a lot of tennis lately, made a deep run there in Rio. He had to play against Tabilo before the rain delay happened on Saturday. The point is, it's a lot of tennis for a young guy. I think that Bousse, who is looking at the actual odds for this match, I believe Bousse is a dog in the first round. Tarante is minus 125, which I think is pretty telling. So Tarante is a favorite in round one, even though Bousse can be tricky to deal with. I acknowledge that. But Tarante's favored. He just had a war against Tabilo, and Tabilo hurt his back. So I think you're looking at a good opportunity for a long shot. I think 66-1 is a great price. And if Tabilo does, in theory, drop out, which I think the more that I talk about it will not happen because it is going to be in Chile, I think he's going to struggle physically. And I think Tarante has a pretty decent path at a massive price. That is my super long shot dart throw of the week. Give me Tarante at 66-1 as my choice there as the long shot. So once again, the outrights for the 3 events for the upcoming week. For the event in Dubai, for the outrights to win, we have Felix at 5-1, we have Medvedev at 750, and we have Rublev at 12-1. For Acapulco, we won pure chalk. We took the 2 favorites. We have Zverev at 275. We have Zverev at 250, and we have Dimonauer at 275. And for the Santiago event on clay, we kind of found a balance. We took Baez at 7-1. We took Darderi at 7-1. We took Carabelli at 12-1, and we took our long shot flyer dart throw Tarante at 66-1. And it's going to wrap it up for the actual outrights for the 3 events. I'll move on into the lock and dog picks. Before we get into the lock and dog, a reminder, they're brought to you by our sponsor, which is Arling Fantasy. So if you want to check them out, they have a lot of great options for pick'em entries, chance to win up to 5,000 times your entry, pick higher or lower in player stats. You can also mix and match your sports, including tennis. So check it out. And if you're new to the platform, great sign-up deal. Play just $5, $75 bonus funds when you sign up with the code SGPN at Underdog Fantasy. We're also brought to you by Novig. So Novig, of course, is America's #1 prediction market for sports, and you can check it out. Great prices available for you. Download the app, get $50, and you spend just $5 if you use the code SGPN. So once again, Novig, great deal, great overall market. You'll find a lot of great prices. Get a great deal. Spend $5, get $50 when you sign up with the code SGPN. That's Novig, Novig, Novig. Welcome back, everyone, to the Tennis Game Podcast. Finish going through the outrights for Acapulco, for Dubai, and for Santiago. Time to move on into the lock and dog picks. For the lock, going back to Dubai, going with the deja vu match, actually, Medvedev is taking on Shang. We're going to take Medvedev 2-0 at -121. Now, Medvedev just beat Shang in straight sets about a week ago in Doha. Shang won a grand total of 6 games. Now, Medvedev has been great here historically. He's 10-2 lifetime in Dubai. He won a title here. 9 of those 10 wins were in straight sets. He's beaten Djokovic here. He's beaten Rublev here. He's beaten top-tier talent. Yes, I know Medvedev did eventually fall apart to Tsitsipas in Doha, but he beat Shang. He kind of exposed Shang. We know Shang likes to stand behind the baseline, not exactly a dominant serve, and he really never comes forward. So Medvedev should stand behind the baseline like he normally does, hit returns in, and Shang is going to have to try to outlast him on the baseline because he's not feeling that comfortable coming forward to volley. I think it's a bad matchup, and we saw that about a week ago. And Medvedev, I think, is once again going to look sharp here. Former champion. Shang has never played in Dubai before. I think he'll struggle. I think Medvedev's a bad matchup. Give me the straight set win once again. The pure deja vu result. Medvedev 2-0, -121 as my lock for the show. For the dog going to Acapulco, going to go to a match between Kovacevic and Walton. Give me the over 2.5 sets at +130. Now, here's a crazy stat that I triple-checked. I counted it myself. Walton has lost at least one set. Once again, at least one set he's lost in 29 of his last 30 matches. That is correct. He has only won in straight sets one time in his last 30 matches. Coincidentally, it was in the last event against Diallo, who's been horrific all season. But the point is, Walton is almost guaranteed to lose a set in every match he plays. I'll back that trend. Kovacevic, though, we know is very, I'd say, very inconsistent as well. He has lost at least one set in 10 of his last 12. So both guys are volatile. Both guys are streaky. I think that you are going to see a war. We saw it happen last year. They played in this exact event, and we saw Walton win in 3. But once again, you're going to be 2 guys who punt sets all the time for a living. Kovacevic is 10-2 to dropping a set, and Walton's dropped at least one set. I'll rephrase it. Kovacevic has lost at least one set in 10 of his last 12. Walton has lost at least one set once again in 29 of his last 30 matches, which is insane. Give me the over 2.5 sets at +130, a repeat of last year as my dog for the show. So once again, the lock and dog picks. The lock's going to be on Medvedev 2-0 against Shang at -121. For the dog, give me Kovacevic and Walton over 2.5 sets at +130 in Acapulco. I know it's going to wrap it up for the show. Like once again, for the quarters in Dubai, definitely Santiago, I'm not sure about, and definitely not Acapulco. We are basically punting Acapulco because every match day is going to be ending very, very late. We will not have any episodes during the week for Acapulco. Maybe a final very late, but who knows? Point is, we're back again for Dubai, guaranteed over the next few days. Till next time,